Thank you, Steve Kirsch, for coming to the Computer History Museum for the second session of your oral history. My name is Gunter Steinbach. So the last time at the first session, we covered your early history, youth and college. We covered the optical mouse and mouse systems. And we covered two more companies you founded, Frame Technology and Infoseek. In the case of Infoseek, we did not get quite to how your involvement ended and what became of the company. Can you talk about that?
Sure. We hired a CEO, Harry Matro, from he used to work at CNN. And about a year into it, Disney came knocking and wanted to acquire Infoseek, and they wanted to merge it with their other properties and call the combined company Go Network. And so the shareholders decided that was a good idea. So we got acquired, and after getting acquired, Disney wanted to run it their way with their people, and so they displaced the current management team.
Oh, Disney. I would not have expected that. But I guess they pushed into digital content and things. Okay. The next company you founded was Propel in '99. What can you tell us about that?
So that was right at the as the internet bubble was bubbling, and initially it was designed to be like Amazon in a box, that you could get an e-commerce site up and running easily. And so we focused a lot of development on that. And then the market turned on us, and so we laid off a lot of people, and we focused on an internet acceleration technology that I had created, and so it enabled people to, with slow lines, to essentially accelerate their browsing experience. And the way that it worked was that we would grab a page from the remote site. We would compress it, and we would send the compressed version down to the local browser to be decompressed. And what we did was that because a lot of text in pages is fairly common, we had a compression algorithm that would reduce to a hash code. So it wasn't a generic compression algorithm. It was specifically designed to look for patterns in the HTML that would be common across many pages in a site. You know, there's a lot of template code. And when you visit the page a second time, that a lot of the things on that page are the same. And there might be just minor differences. And so if we could go and figure out a way to difference that off of the hash codes that you already had, then that would be a really powerful technique for compression. And so basically we tried to chunk up the text into sort of manageable pieces that we thought would be replicated the next time you visited that page. And so even if one byte on the page changed, normally you have to download the entire page. So here you'd only have to download the byte.
If the customer's browser cooperates by storing the previous page.
Correct. And so the point was that our software, that we gave software into the computer, into the user's computer, which would generate and store these hash codes based on the same breaking algorithm as the server. And so the server would basically assume that the user had all of the hash codes. And so any hash code that the user didn't have, he would say, okay, hey, thank you very much, but I don't have the following 12 hash codes. Please send them to me. And so therefore, on the assumption that most things are the same, then the number of undefined hash codes for a given user would be very small.
Right.
And so that was the whole premise for how the algorithm worked.
If the user has enough storage space to.
Yeah, and
keep
generally
things
that's not a
around.
problem.
Yeah.
Right? You know, generally it was the bandwidth that was the issue
Yeah.
at the time. And so this would provide a greatly accelerated experience, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 times faster
Okay.
than browsing the standard way, because we simply could send quite a bit less data. And we would not, if there were like 12 requests for a page, that could be done in a single packet. And so it wasn't like you had to open up connections and do 3-way handshakes with each time you download a page. So you save on latency time to set up a TCP connection, and you'd also save on the DNS time, because you wouldn't have to wait for the DNS and get a response from the DNS and then go to the website, do the 3-way handshake, and so forth. So there was a tremendous amount of savings by doing it this way.
Okay. And so your servers also would cache pages to help with
Well,
that?
no, we didn't have to cache anything, right? That's the beauty of it. Because the hash codes...
Oh, the customer would cache.
The customer caches.
Okay.
So I have the world's largest cache.
Yes.
Right? I don't have to have any expense at all. All I have to do is break the pages in the same way every single time. So if I saw a similar page, as long as my page breaks were about the same, then most of the hash codes would be defined.
Okay.
And so I get away with the world's fastest accelerator and not have to store anything.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
However, with the advent of broadband, that market would shrink. I
Right,
guess.
right. Because then it's faster to just take the page and download and not do any processing and not even have the latency, because the bandwidth is so fast.
Yeah.
So we would see that if you were on a fast internet connection, there wouldn't be much of a speed up.
Yeah.
It would only be
Right.
if you were on a slow connection that
Yeah.
you'd see the difference.
Do you remember? Did you found that company on your own, or did you have co-founders?
For Propel, yeah, there were a bunch of co-founders, but I'm at a loss for remembering.
And you used venture capital
Yes.
to set up. I mean, there isn't much overhead in internet stuff, right? You need a few servers.
Well, in our case, when we started doing this Amazon in a box stuff, it was actually we raised a lot of money from a lot of people, including myself. I put a lot of money in that.
That's right, and there wasn't a cloud available at that point that you could rent computing power from Amazon or Google, right?
At that time, there were services, there were cloud services, like a rack space equivalent that you could use, and so that's what we used.
Okay, so when did you end your involvement, and what is the company still around?
Is Propel still around? No, it sold off its assets to another company, and so it's no longer around.
Okay, so your next company you founded in 2005. Is that how long you were with Propel?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that next company was Abaca,
Right.
which was a spam filter company. So
correct. And
tell us
so
about that.
we were looking for domain names. We wanted something at the beginning of the alphabet, and so we started looking for words that weren't that weren't taken.
Okay.
So this was a fairly meaningless word.
Yeah.
It has to do with something about banana or hemp or something.
Well,
like
and
that.
to me, abacus came to my mind,
but that's not.
which is computing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what was special about that spam filter?
Well, I was going to retire, but I was just getting too much spam, and I thought, shit, these guys who are focusing on it are focusing on the message and looking at the message and dissecting the message. And I thought that was not an effective approach. And so I was looking more about who the sender was and who he was sending it to. And so the content was less interesting. What's more interesting is who the sender is, what's his reputation, and who's he sending his messages to. Because spammers have a unique characteristic that they send to people who get a lot of spam, by and large, right? Because by definition, if I don't get any spam at all, you're not sending anything to me.
Right.
So I could characterize, so let's say there are 10 people at a company. I can characterize those 10 people based on the amount of spam that they get.
Okay.
Okay. And once I have that, and it's kind of iterative, right? Because you start knowing nothing, and people start rating things and so forth, and you can and you have blacklists and so forth, so you can get a pretty close idea of who's getting the most spam just by looking at IP blacklists. Mm-hmm. Right? So you now have a range of users. Some people are getting very little spam or no spam, and some people are getting lots of spam. And so what you do is you look at the sender. And if the sender sends to the people who get a lot of spam, and this guy and this guy, but doesn't send to these guys who are fairly hammy, then it's much more likely. And at the extreme ends are spam traps, where if you send to the spam trap, this is a person who's been dead at the company for, left the company 20 years ago, right? Who's going to be sending a mail? Well, they're going to be mailing lists, which are going to be known senders because they would have been whitelisted before, or they're going to be unknown senders. So an unknown sender sending a guy who's basically gets nothing but spam is pretty darn likely to be a spammer. Okay? Right. And so when you hit, a couple of those or 3 of those or 4 of those, there's no doubt that this guy is a spammer.
Okay.
And so people had been focusing on the extremes to say, okay, fine, if you hit a spam trap, you're out. But what we did is we said, okay, there's a kind of a gray zone between people who are the spam traps on the one hand and the ham traps who get nothing but ham. And that's the easy way to do it. So what we did is we looked at the mathematics, and based on the mathematics and based on where you were sending to, we could compute, even if you didn't send to pure spam traps, we could compute the likelihood that you were a spammer. And so we had a lot more data, and so we could do things much more accurately. And so it's virtually impossible to defeat it.
After some learning time?
Yeah, after, if you've sent, you take an IP address, you pick a random IP address, it's completely unknown. Within 3 or 4 messages, you're sending to a spam trap, or your odds of, when you look at the probability that this guy is hammy, if he's sent to these guys who are all on the far end of the curve in terms of receiving mail, after you've sent about 5 messages or 10 messages, you're done. Yeah. And so then it's like, okay, gee, I better pick a different IP address or a different sender. And so you're always caught then trying to find a new IP address. And generally we look at IP blocks, and we have reputations on the IP blocks to say, oh, fine, this one is available because it's coming from China and so forth. And so that's going to, just starting off, we'll probably say, hey, look, we put it in the quarantine. We might put it at the top of the quarantine because we're not as sure as if you were to sending more, but because its IP range is associated with spammers more than people who send ham, then we could go and have our initial assumptions based on the mathematics. What's the a priori? If you know nothing other than it came from this IP range, probable 52% spam, right? And so you put it in the quarantine, but you put it at the top. And so we had a ranked quarantine based on probability scores rather than, oh, this text looks similar to a text sent by a spammer. And so we could get very accurate probabilities. And the beauty is that when you looked at your quarantine, it was a sorted quarantine based on the probability that this is a spam. And so that makes it much easier, because instead of, like right now, when I have my spam filter with Microsoft, it's like, okay, there's stuff that makes it into your box, and then there's the clutter, and then there's the quarantine. but it not ranked.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to go through every single frickin' message to go and find out where the spam is.
So did you look at content at all or not at all?
Yeah, because we could look at some content was known to be like links and text ranges and so forth. Could also have an association with them that, anytime you see the words this, and this together,
Nigerian Ministry of
the
something.
only time you see that combination is in a spammy message.
Yeah.
Right? And so even if you were obfuscating by having these techniques where you would encode the text into whatever and stick in random stuff, the fact that you were sending out weird combinations was an immediate trigger. And so we did use the content, and we used where it was coming from and so forth. You basically couldn't get through it. It was like, we had like 5 nines in terms of the accuracy of the spam filter. And we tried to approach, bigger companies like Microsoft and so forth, got nowhere. Couldn't get to first base. It was like not invented here.
Yeah.
Even though it was brilliant and the most effective spam filter ever. So.
Yeah, I guess not invented here. I just, the other day, pulled a message out of the Google spam folder.
Yeah.
That came from somebody who I had received mail before, but apparently because of the content pattern, it must have flagged it.
Right. So I think we probably didn't do an effective job marketing it in terms of that. Hey, look, we've got a ranked quarantine, right? Because that's a huge differentiator, and it just saves you a lot of time, because you really don't want to have to go through and spend the time to go through your spam folder,
right?
And yet you have to.
Yes.
Because you're looking for that. Oh shit! There's a really important
Which
message that's not in the spam. So you're stuck.
Yeah.
Having to go
600
through
messages
all
in
this
1 month, and
and it's just it's a total waste of everyone's time.
Yeah.
So Proofpoint acquired the technology.
Okay.
And has incorporated into to Proofpoint spam filtering.
Okay, so that's another spam filter company.
Right. Yeah. And David Fuchs was one of the key engineers on making that happen.
And that was, you marketed it to companies or to individuals?
It was sold to companies.
Okay, as a company-wide spam filter. And again, with venture capital?
Yeah.
Okay. And in that case, you wouldn't need much in the way of your own servers and things, right? You would sell the software or license the software to your customer. Or did you have your own servers that or you probably want to consolidate different customers, right?
Yeah. So we had the ability to be a cloud service as well as on-site.
Okay. And was it, again, did you have co-founders? And do you remember them?
David Fuchs was an early employee, so he was extremely helpful. And there were a few others. Eric Brown.
Okay. So then your next company was OneID in 2011.
Yeah.
So you stayed with Abaca for those 6 years?
Yeah.
So tell us about OneID.
So OneID is out of the frustration of usernames and passwords. Half the people use the same password on every site. It's a security nightmare. And to have to use two-factor auth is a pain in the ass. And today even Google does a lousy implementation of two-factor auth. Like, I'll go and it will bother me like every couple of days and say, relog into Google. Why? I'm not under attack. My account has not been breached.
But do they know that?
But I actually don't prefer not to be bothered by that. And I would much rather say, you got a weirdo login. By the way, we didn't block it or anything. But And then I could say, okay, set my danger threshold to higher. But hey, they treat everybody the same, right? Even though I don't really care if anybody gets the information that I'm working on, because our secrecy is not about the secrecy of our information. So I don't really care. I would rather not be hassled by, oh, you're offline. It says, sorry, you have to log in, and you can't because you're currently offline, and the software says you have to log in. Well, that's no good. And plus it's just a pain. You have to go and then log in, and if you want to be safe, you'd use a two-factor auth and do that. But where is they do it just based on time, right? Oh, well, let's just bug the guy every couple of days to log in, instead of, oh, this guy's coming from a new IP address, or this usage pattern is different than his usage pattern. Like, why aren't we using smarts to figure out, oh, I think there might be a problem here, so therefore I'm going to increase the level of assurance that it's really the person. And so we typically get really dumb stuff in terms of in terms of authentication, where if you log into the bank, they assume you're a crook, right? I mean, I spent an hour trying to get into my Verizon account. They said, okay, do this. Now do this. Now tell us the answer to this question. Okay, now that you've got that, tell us the billing zip code. Well, my company's moved like 6 times. And, so I'm entering the zip codes, and, and for whatever reason, I get it wrong. Now I'm locked out. Now I have to call up. Now I have to re-authenticate. Now they have to unlock my account, but they can't. Oh, great. They say unlock my account. Now my new password is sent to my old email at OneID, which no longer works. Okay, so no problem. So I call them up again, and now I have to change the email address to the current email address. But sorry, as a security precaution, we don't allow you to reset your password.
And
if you've changed your email address, then it takes 30 days before you can reset your password, because we want to make sure. Okay, so how many people are out there stealing Verizon accounts so that they can change the plan? I mean, are you serious? I can't, it's like the security guys who come up with this is like, oh, protect the company, protect the company. From changing my plan off of my $50 a month plan onto, because I was trying to change it to $50 to $15. Now, how much fraud do you think there is of people breaking into people's Verizon's account to change their plan so they can save money? I mean, there must be a lot of fraud in that, because I had to go through an hour of authentication just so I could change my plan to a cheaper plan. Yeah. So anyway, identity is broken. It's been broken for a long time. We need to get rid of usernames and passwords. That's 50-year-old technology. I talked to I was on Airlink at JFK yesterday, and the guy sitting next to me is a software engineer from Google. And so I said, look, you guys should get rid of usernames and passwords. You should just be using, cryptographic digital signatures. He says, no, I believe in practical security. Okay, but yeah, I believe in practical security too, but security is all about trade-offs between what the risks are and the convenience for the user. And more often than not, we go way overboard on, let me get, make sure your password is, has enough, one digit and, blah, blah, blah. Come on, anything that first of all, you're going to use the same password everywhere. Okay, and they're not going to be able to prevent you from doing that because they don't know the same password anywhere. So, and stuff, the stuff is easy to crack, right? Because unless your password's like 23 characters, your password's toast. Even if it's got one letter, one digit, and they're not going to require people to have, and make sure your password is at least 23 characters and 6 digits and blah blah blah, because nobody's going to do that. And so it's completely false sense of security, and nobody should be doing that anyway, because the fact is that nobody's going to remember 400 different passwords. I have trouble remembering just, a couple. So it's a completely broken system. And there is a better way to do it. And so that's why we started OneID.
And
and failed to get websites to adopt it. And that was the amazing thing, right? Because people hate usernames and passwords. The consumers do. But the companies, they just look at that as saying, oh, people are used to that, and they don't care.
They don't.
And we couldn't find a company to implement this to save our lives. And that was the really surprising things. With all of the problems with usernames and passwords, it's so ingrained that it would be like taking away people's internet or something. Even if you're replacing it with something better, it's like it was just really surprising, right? Because I thought that this would be okay. World will be a path to my door on this one, because it's a simpler, easier, and more secure way to authenticate.
Well, when you say,
I mean, you basically you press a button, and you'd enter in your email address or some identifier for you. And it could be your OneID ID name, like Steve, or it could be your email address or your phone number, something that's associated with you. It could be anything that you associated with your identity, and then it would just pop up on your phone, and you would click OK, and you're done. And that was it. Yeah, really simple. And it's secure because it was digitally signed in the phone. There was a secret in the phone, and it's a cryptographic secret, so it was actually cryptographically signed. So simple idea. And it's two-factor auth because you have to have the phone, which is possession. And you have to be able to unlock it, which is the second factor. And so all you're doing is clicking OK.
Okay, and your device communicates with.
Yeah, and
the
the protocols were designed by cryptographic experts, such that if somebody broke into OneID, they're not going to steal everyone's identity, because the crypto keys were fundamentally kept at the endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
So it was end-to-end secure. It's not like PKI, which if you breach the servers in PKI, the certificate authorities, you break into one of those, all bets are off. It's not an end-to-end secure system. So our stuff was designed not to use anything that wasn't end-to-end secure. So if you broke into OneID, you couldn't compromise anyone's identity. You break into Google, you've compromised everyone's identity, because it's all shared secrets. The whole thing, even the two-factor auth, is shared secrets. So
right, you get the person's phone number.
Once you broken into Google, you can fake the authorization for any Google user.
Now,
right? So it's a horrible federated identity.
When you said people didn't want it, those are companies that didn't want it.
Companies, right?
Users
they
use what they're told, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or what they can use.
I don't think they would complain. Now, you need an application running on the user's device. Is that true?
Yeah, you need, no, because we had it all running in the web browser.
Okay.
So you didn't need to have an app. We had an app on the phone that was used for to confirm, who you were.
Okay, but
so you
on a home computer,
yeah,
it would be in the browser. So you just need a modern browser.
Yeah, and in most cases, unless you needed the extra assurance, we would drop a key on the user's browser so they didn't have to use their mobile phone. So they could just click in and click, hey, I'm Steve, and I'm in. Okay. And if they wanted to, they could have a PIN code. But the PIN code wasn't a shared secret. The PIN code was used to hash against a local secret. So you take the PIN plus hashing it with a local high entropy secret. And that would be used to sign the transaction to get in. So if you broke into OneID, it's not like we have all the 4-digit PIN codes, or that someone could ever break into your account. So nobody could ever guess your PIN code. Like I could have 1111 as my PIN code, and it didn't matter. I could tell you that my PIN code was one, but unless you had my device,
Yeah.
right? And then, if my device got stolen, then somebody has to come up with a 4-digit PIN, and the server only gives them like 4 guesses. So the chance that they're going to hit your PIN is next to 0, and they can't. Every time they try, they have to do it against the server, so they can't do a brute force attack. So it was extremely simple for users.
And since it's in the browser, it would run on any operating system. I'm running
Correct.
Linux at
Yes.
home, and
Yes.
so some of these things don't completely work.
Yeah.
My son made me use 1Password. It's
Yeah.
a new
Yeah.
site.
It's horrible.
And it's
horrible. It's a crutch to enable us to keep using technology.
keep your
that's 50
usernames
year-
and
50 year-
passwords.
Yeah. It's horrible.
okay. So, do you remember the co-founders or money sources for that?
Khosla Ventures, and dang, I'm blanking on the other VC.
Okay.
And on OneID, Jim Fenton was one of the co-founders of that.
And you said nobody wanted to buy it, so did you wind that down then?
It was sold off to another company. Let's see. Gosh, I'm always blank on the name of that company.
That's okay. But anyway, the technology lives on. At another.
Yeah. But for IoT.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Which is really a shame, because the problem is still unsolved. Authentication is still using 50-year-old technology, and the guys who are breaking it are using modern technology. It's not even a close call, and it is just brain dead silly that. And I try to interest the government, and you get referred by, oh, you should talk to this person, this person, this person. And finally, all roads led to this one person, and that person just wouldn't return any of my calls. Right? I mean, it's almost like there's a conspiracy to make sure that it's almost like the criminals control, all these companies and so forth to make sure that we don't get better authentication.
And you don't think they could catch up with that?
No.
The criminals?
No. It was very, very well designed. And almost the problem was that if you explained it to someone, you had to be a cryptologist to understand how it really worked and why it was secure. And if you weren't, it was like, I'm talking, oh, and this key talks to this key, which da-da-da-da-da, and it sounds like gibberish.
Oh.
Right? It sounds like I'm a mad scientist.
Okay, so that gets us to your most recent venture, which is Token, founded in 2015.
Yeah.
What's Token about?
So Token is to provide banks with a platform, open banking platform, that developers can then use that to write applications. So for developers, we present a single API across all banks, and for banks, we present an operating system that can be used to expose the bank to developers. So you can think of Token is to a bank what Android is to a mobile phone manufacturer.
Oh, okay.
That's the simplest way to, or what Microsoft Windows is to a PC manufacturer.
Okay.
So we're kind of like the gateway between the bank and the developer, and so we translate developer code into bank speak, and so we're middleware between a bank and a developer, basically.
Okay, so an operating system, you call it. So
yeah, I mean, you can think of it
the
because
enterprise on basically.
well, you have a bunch of API calls to say, hey, push funds, pull funds,
okay.
da 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 da. So you have a set of functionality that's unique to banks.
Okay.
In the same way that an operating system would have functionality that's unique to the PC, like print this or get this off of the local disk.
But there are things that are common to all companies, like deal with this customer, right? Get this customer's records, which you also have to handle then, right? Or would there somebody else's software handling that?
No. We the point is that you would use our software to interface to the bank.
Okay. And so that is well, I guess when I read through your list of companies, I thought that was the point where you went away from the individual customer, but that's not true. You actually, even Abaca already, you said, was selling or trying to sell to companies.
Correct.
Right. So, yeah. Did you, how do I ask this? What's the big difference that you see between selling to individuals and selling to companies?
Well, I mean, there are two different types of companies that do that. So you approach it differently. I mean, for consumers, it's more about mass marketing. For companies, it's about targeting and figuring out who you're going after and engaging with them on more of a one-to-one basis, where it's impossible to do that consumer basis. You have to, it's more one-to-many and consumer versus more one-to-one on a corporate sale.
Okay.
Right.
Where
you know who each customer is and what their needs are, and you're working with them and meeting with them over and over and over. You can never do that with a consumer product.
So you need different people, like different salespeople.
Right? Yes, different, yes. Yeah, and it's a different sales approach, right? Because for consumer products, it's more about marketing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And who were your co-founders for Token and your investors?
So Token, let's see, Yobi Benjamin from former CTO for Citigroup, Hillary Grant Valdez, and Peter, blanking on his last name. Let's see if I can find him. Peter Potts.
So these are banking people?
Yeah, these people had banking backgrounds.
Okay. Okay, and Token is still going on, and you're still involved with them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we raised $18.5 million and have about 35 people in San Francisco and London.
I would assume that it's pretty hard to get a bank to switch to a different operating system.
Correct. Yeah, it's pretty hard for a bank to make a decision to do anything.
Right.
You know, they're
the stakes
very
are high.
conservative, used to slow decision making. They get hounded by thousands of fintechs who want to do business with the bank. They have to narrow their focus with who they're dealing with, and then it's like 20 20 to 50 to 100 people have to get involved in making the decision. So it's ridiculous.
Okay. All right. So we're through with the list of companies that you founded, and I was looking at your homepage, and you do. I was looking at the awards you got, and I was surprised that prominent was awards for philanthropy, right? For not just giving money to causes, but for proselytizing others to give money. And I read through a slideshow that you made about, I think, donors-directed charitable funds. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I've been doing giving for a very long time, and I was involved in one charity which I thought was a pretty good organization, and they drafted me to go and ask people for money. And so I was being coached by Leonard Ely, who's a very famous guy. And so I asked Leonard, I said, so how do you go about asking people for $1 million donation? I mean, why would they want to do that? And so he said something to me that I'll never forget, which is, some people want to give money away. And that had never occurred to me before. I always thought, you gotta, separate the money from the person, and it's always a struggle, and people don't want to give you money, and you have to convince them to give you money. But Leonard's position was correct in that people actually have an interest in getting something done, and they want to deploy their capital to achieve that goal. And you're actually doing them a favor by exposing them to something that's going to help them achieve their goal. So, for example, suppose I have diabetes. I would be interested then in funding a cure for diabetes because it personally affects me. And so if I came to you and I said, hey, I've got this super credible project that can do this, then you're saying, like, great, I'd love to help because it affects me, and if this is successful, I'm going to I've got more money than I really need for, I got the private jet, I got the, homes in, 3 different places. And, after the first 100 million, right, it's like, you don't really need that much to live on and to have a really good life. And so then it's about, well, how do you improve your own life by giving the money away to better your own position and also the position of other people because you've cured cancer or you've cured some disease. And so so once I looked at it that way, then I said, then I had a whole different look on philanthropy as, hey, if you're going and asking people for money, you're actually doing them a favor if you're giving them an opportunity to invest in something that's going to make or has a good shot at making a difference in their lives. And so the reason I do it is because I invest in things like diabetes and glaucoma and Waldenstrom's and so forth. These are all diseases that I have that are going to help me, but they'll also help other people. And so it kind of makes sense, right? Because you're helping yourself. So, in some sense, you're not doing it out of pure altruism. You're selecting where you donate your money because, like, I could donate to some cause. In fact, I donated to glaucoma at least 20 years before I developed glaucoma, because it was recommended as, hey, we can actually make some progress in this area. It's debilitating disease, blah, blah, blah. I had no family history of it, and I gave to it because I thought it would be a useful use of money to try to make the world a better place. 20 years later, it turned out that, oh, gee, how did you know you were going to get diabetes 20 years later? You didn't. You just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And so sometimes when you give out money, it can, it can end up helping yourself down the road. So if you gave to, say, cancer research today, hey, who knows whether you're going to get cancer or, heart disease, whatever. I think that if people really wanted to be altruistic, that doing ads on television to tell people about that the recommendations of the government are just awful in terms of of foods. And it was the government basically created this war on fat. And what that meant was you took the fat out and you put sugar in. And so you went from something that was actually beneficial, which has been in the human diet for forever. And you basically said, hey, we're going to make America healthier by telling them to drop the fat. So everybody is saying, hey, this has no fat and all this stuff. No, they just bump up the sugar, right? And it's the sugar that's the dangerous thing, right? Because sugars have fructose. Fructose, if you eat too much of it, turns into to belly fat. And that just accumulates in your belly, and people get fatter and fatter and fatter, and they can't lose it because that fat is protected. And very few people know how to get rid of it. And so we have this health epidemic, which has been created by the government, with all good intentions. I mean, that they thought they were making America healthier. And in reality, they are the biggest instigator for the problems of the diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome. All this stuff is all because of U.S. government intervention into telling people to, So anyway, I'm kind of getting off on that.
It's not automatic that you reduce fat and you increase sugar, right? Or
well, what happens is if you take the fat out, then the taste disappears. And so you need to make it taste good. And you don't want to add fiber because fiber, well, first of all, fiber doesn't taste anything. And the second thing is that they don't add it to the food because it decreases the shelf life and it makes it longer to cook. And so you look at the quote properties, you don't care about the person's health, you care about what their experience is.
Right.
And so it's this vicious circle that leads us to a diet which is killing us. So, anyway, and yet, who is the philanthropist who is stepping up to the table? This would be a great thing for a billionaire to go and say, hey, look, I can make a difference in the lives of hundreds of millions of people or billions of people by educating people to correct the mistakes that the government has made. We should have a label on what the fructose content is on, that's really, really important because that turns into the belly fat, which is super dangerous, causes diabetes and all this stuff. And yet, because of the lobbies and so forth, it's not broken out.
I guess it's not, but carbohydrates are broken out, right?
Carbohydrates are, but carbohydrates in general are pretty good because they'll just turn into fat in overall in the body. It's the fructose that's only metabolized in the liver that if you eat too much of it in a single meal will turn into belly fat.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, nobody knows it. That's the problem. And that's why you see, and nobody knows how to get rid of it once they have it, which is why people, you look at people and you see, half the people are obese and, they got, stomachs.
Yeah.
And, I was the same way. I could not figure out how to lose my belly fat. And I read all these articles, you should eat right and all that. Bullshit. That won't work. This stuff is protected. There are these alpha-2 receptors that you have to disable if you're going to go tap into that belly fat, because the belly fat's completely different than your subcutaneous fat.
Oh.
And so
really?
And so the point is that nobody gets educated on this stuff, and so we have a population which is overweight and unhealthy because the government has actually exacerbated the problem.
With the
and Michelle Obama is saying, get active is all bullshit because it wasn't, we never had a problem before we told people to drop the fat. We never had a problem.
Well, didn't we?
No, people were extremely healthy. Before the government intervened to help people, We were extremely
When was
very,
that?
very few people, the rates of diabetes or metabolic syndrome, vanishingly small in comparison.
So when did the government...
Childhood obesity. You have like
Right.
these 6-month-old kids, 6 months old, right? And they're freaking obese. How is that happening? It's happening because the government wanted to help people. And they never corrected that. And even after they realized the mistake, they still haven't gone off and said, oh, we screwed up. Sorry about that. We screwed up. We shouldn't have told you to drop the fat. It's the sugar that's the killer. Look at what your sugar intake is, get rid of added sugars, and make sure the fiber is high. None of that gets out. Nobody knows that. And which is why we have the problem that we have.
When did they start with low-fat?
70s.
70s. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Pretty late. I mean.
Yeah. But you can look at the obesity, diabetes, all started at the same time.
Well, I learned something.
Yeah.
So.
It's all fascinating. But, so there are lots of things that if you're a philanthropist, you can make tremendous difference.
Well, with a lot
in
of
people's
money.
lives. With a lot of money, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to move the needle.
Then, yeah.
But there are people who have billions and billions of dollars that could make a meaningful difference in the lives of billions of people by having, little commercials that educate people on, hey, it's not the fat, it's the sugar. Pay attention to the sugar and minimize the amount of sugar that you have in any one, sitting to allow your body to assimilate it. And here's how you can lose belly fat. And if you just corrected the evils of fat is bad, if you just did that one thing and said, hey, there's no problem with fat. And carbs are okay too. The sugar's another story.
Okay.
High fructose corn syrup, all that stuff. Yeah. So, there are lots of opportunities, and this is just one of them that happens to be on my mind because it affects so many people in devastating ways. If you have diabetes, you can even lose limbs, and people seem to prefer to have a lost limb than to take the diabetes medicines. And the diabetes medicines are terrible anyway. And we treat diabetes the wrong way. With drugs that will can kill you. Give you pancreatitis and so forth.
I thought you just take insulin.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, and insulin's probably insulin's the safest way to treat diabetes. But the doctors don't like to prescribe it. When I got diagnosed, it was like, oh, shooting insulin? No, that's like the last on the list.
Really?
Yeah. Even though that's like the obvious thing to do. Yeah, really. It's like, oh, people don't like to stick themselves or so forth. Yeah, but that's because you haven't educated them on, these needles are like nano needles. They don't hurt at all. You can't really feel them when you inject. But if you fix your diet, you get rid of your belly fat and if you had diabetes, you can get rid of it. Unless you're really all the way gone. Exercise.
Some kinds of diabetes, I assume, the ones that you acquire later in life. I could
type
see
2. Type 2, you can get rid of.
If it's
type 1, that's another story.
Yeah, if you have inherited it, there's probably diet will not cure it, right?
That's right. Yeah, type 2 is the. I had blood sugars 130, and my blood sugar is like 65 now, which is an amazing difference. And that's with no drugs.
By diet and exercise?
By diet and exercise.
Very good.
Yeah, intermittent fasting and so forth just makes it, and got rid of all my belly fat. just makes a huge difference.
Huh. Very good.
So this is not the Computer History Museum interview. This is the.
It's okay. It's your history.
Yeah.
Right. It's your history and your opinions that we want to hear.
Yeah. And so look, if anyone is actually watching this and listening to all of it, please send me an email. I want to know that that this made a difference.
I recently got an email from somebody commenting on one of the videos that went on YouTube. YouTube seems to be. I mean, that's the most accessible place, probably, right? You search for something and you get.
But there's so much content.
But
so it's
So after I sent you my questions yesterday, I actually went back to your homepage and I found some other things that that really kind of caught my eye. One of them was you make a pretty convincing plea for building nuclear reactors, especially the integral fast reactor, breeder reactors. And you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. I used to be anti-nuclear because people who were advising me told me, oh, nuclear is bad and you don't need it, and so I came to discover on my own that nuclear is actually really good, and it's really the safest form of power. And if you look at the number of deaths caused by nuclear, it's minuscule compared to any other form of power. And so why aren't we using it? Well, it's like fear. And there's this joke about nuclear radiation, that if the radiation comes from background radiation and it's natural, then it's okay. But if it comes from a nuclear reactor, then it must be evil. It's the same stuff. And it turns out that there's 100 times more radiation from a coal plant. 100 times more radiation out of a coal plant than out of a nuclear plant.
In the smoke, or in
yeah. And so, what does our president want to do? Yeah, want to increase the amount of coal plants. Think there's any mass protests about doing that? Not really. Coal miners like it, but
even though they die.
But you see these guys protesting nuclear plants as being unsafe, even though the coal plants, right? When was the last time you saw a demonstration outside of the coal plant saying, hey, these are 100 times more radiation from a coal plant than a nuclear plant. We should shut down the coal plants. Promote nuclear. How many times you see demonstrators do that? None. They don't know. In fact, the demonstrators, they give out bananas at the to the demonstrators who are demonstrating against nuclear radiation. Well, bananas have more radiation in them than most other things. Like it's like
really?
Yeah. It's the radiation from a banana is actually fairly significant on a it's still insignificant, but it was kind of ironic. We look at that and we say, oh, they're giving them bananas, right? It's just kind of funny, right? If you really understand it, and the radiation levels we're talking about, people think that any radiation above 0 is bad for you, but in fact the studies are that there's kind of a safe zone where radiation can be really helpful in getting rid of the mutations which are more sensitive to radiation. And so this background radiation that we're all exposed to is actually a beneficial thing because it helps to kill off the mutations that would have a tough time surviving. And so it ends up being helpful. And so you look at Chernobyl and so forth. Nowadays it's very, very safe. But anyway, nuclear's gotten a bad rap. It's gotten a very unfair bad rap, and the climate change really requires us to come up with a source of energy which is zero emission, which can be scaled and runs 24/7. Nuclear fits that bill to a T. There isn't anything else that comes close to it, and it shouldn't be ruled out of the mix. It should be part of the mix. And if we were really serious about it, we could go and figure out how to get the cost down and turn these things out in mass production and so forth, and we'd have a much better society because of that. Because the pollution in China and other countries is just going to kill us all.
Now, one of the statements in that article was that these breeder reactors are so safe because they simply stop working when everything breaks.
That's right. Yeah, so if there's a coolant leak or whatever, like there was in Japan, instead of the whole thing, the reactor getting, overheating and exploding and, whatnot, the thing that just shuts down because of the design. And so it's inherently safe design. And so they ran through the 3 Mile Island, scenario and so forth. And the reactor just shut down.
Now, I was going to ask you about that because most of the things cited on that page were written before Fukushima. So you are...
Same thing would have happened. It's no different. I mean, Fukushima was a reactor. It was designed like 50 years ago. They shouldn't have put the generators in the basement. So there were some design mistakes. But this is not this was definitely not a next generation sodium fast reactor. The sodium fast reactors are not under any pressure at all. If there's a problem, the things just shut down.
Well, if there's a breach, your sodium would
catch fire, but the fires are but the fires are easy to, if you understand how to deal with them, they're easy to put out. And the beauty is that the coolant's not under any pressure.
Okay. And it wouldn't be, the fire wouldn't spew radioactivity?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
we'll
you really have to look at the safety track record of these reactors, and you have to look at certain doom that we're facing right now with global warming. It's not even a close call. If you look at it, rationally, based on facts, based on what the experience is, based on safety profile, based on the physics, it's not even a close call.
Okay. One statement also, the second statement that I had questions about was, it said you don't need, for the breeders, you do not need enrichment of your fuel. You can use the spent fuel from others. And so you don't have...
Well, you still need enriched fuel to get the thing started. Right?
Okay.
It's like, starting a fire, you need enriched stuff. But the stuff that can burn is the stuff that's the waste product of the other reactors. So fast reactors are able to utilize a much broader range of fuel sources than their traditional uranium reactor.
Right, and the argument was that reduces the proliferation concerns. But
yeah, because the material that is used in these reactors is basically impure. It doesn't need to be pure plutonium or any of that stuff. So it's and plus it's too hot to handle. If somebody tried to break into the reactor to steal the radioactive material, they die. There's no good way to steal it.
Because the reactor actually enriches, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
it makes the material would be too hot to handle.
Okay, so
plus the waste product is not usable in a bomb. The thing is that if it is usable, then there are much easier ways to get it than from a fast reactor. Like fast reactor is probably your last source. So, I suppose you could say that there's risk in anything, but the risk here is really remote because you'd have to invent lots of science that's not yet invented in order to go and use that in a bomb. So there are much quicker paths that if you're determined to do it, that you would go on. It'd be like, why would you go the long way around that will take you, 20 years longer versus the the shortcut approach.
Okay. Another plea on your page is that we should produce synfuel from the CO2 dissolved in seawater, which requires lots of energy, of course. So it basically would
So you use
require
nuclear. You can use
nuclear
nuclear power to do that, and so that's so people have been working on that problem, and it's just it's an economics thing. So if we can get the cost down, it's pretty interesting.
And there is enough CO2 in the water
Plenty.
to make it feasible?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Not a problem.
Because in the past, people use coal or something,
Yeah.
right, or
Yeah.
oil.
Yeah.
so
No, it's not. I mean, the Navy's been working on this, and the costs are actually not that far away than getting the fuel from traditional sources.
It wouldn't be gasoline. It would be probably a simpler carbohydrate.
Yeah. So
like
there's a
methane or
Fischer-Tropsch
something.
reaction.
Okay. And the last question I have is there's an entry in your homepage about this rare form of blood cancer that you have.
Yeah.
And the treatments that you tried, because there's apparently no approved
There is now. There's ibrutinib,
okay.
which is approved.
So that's an older entry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it was before the ibrutinib got approved.
okay, and did you spend your own money on bringing that treatment about? There was something about you were looking into it at least.
Yeah,
or
I funded
to-
some researchers, and I knew about the drug before it got on the market, and offered to help them.
That would be with tests and clinical
Whatever,
trials and
connecting
things.
them with people, or helping on the clinical trials, or what have you.
But so there are companies actually working on this, even though it's very rare.
Oh yeah, because it's easier to get drug approval on rare diseases, because otherwise, if it wasn't that way, then nobody would work on rare diseases.
Okay.
Right. So the cost the cost of doing the clinical trials are much smaller, and so it's actually
because
even
you
though
have-
the market is smaller, the costs are smaller. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, because otherwise, orphan diseases would truly be orphan diseases.
Right.